That's why I went on TV, silly. Just to show Barney can shove his thread. Screw the rules. They bend the rules all the time. Why shouldn't we? I mean, why can't we change the rules?
Hello and welcome to Haunting the Narrative. I'm Lizzie, and today on the pod we've got...
Meg.
Natasha!
And Mairead, dragged here under protest, the usual.
You insisted on being here this time. Like, we were going to do it without you, and you were like, no.
Would you believe someone who has a podcast? A podcast?
All right, so after 10 or more episodes of saying, and today we're mainly going to focus on the books, we are here finally to talk a bit about the show. This will be very exciting to many of our listeners. It's funny because the show, I think, is the reason we're all here, really. I think we all watched the show first and then read the books and went, that was really different, but also somehow exactly the same. How did they do that? So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Magic of adaptation.
Either dark magic or they're really good at making TV. One of the two.
All right, so this really would not be Haunting the Narrative if we didn't first start with some pedantic thoughts from Mairead. So, Mairead, what makes a successful adaptation?
What a great question. I'm so glad you asked. I suppose it's the thing that I'm going to be pedantic about is that we have to define our terms before we have any sort of conversation. And what we really need to define here is what is the measure of success. So, comparing an adaptation to its source in a meaningful way is always going to be a challenge because it's so much more complicated. Like whether it succeeds or fails is so much more complicated than just, is it exactly faithful to the source material? Because it's like, to take an example from my own working life, translation, which is just another form of adaptation, there's always going to be this tension between making it really sound fluent in your target language, which is the language you're translating into, and while staying faithful to your source text. And the thing that makes translation difficult then is that what works in one language will not work on the other. And it's all forms of adaptation are like this because what works on the page will not always work on the screen. So you have this tension between like fluency in the language of screen and fidelity to like the form and the content, the themes and the characterization and the atmosphere and the imagery and all the rest of it of the source material. So when a screenwriter is adapting a source text, like a bit like a translator, they have to be really familiar. They really need to know what works on screen. So actually, when you're translating, what matters more than, I translate from German to English. It's more important for me to be really good at English than it is for me to understand German really, really well. Because I can go away and I can use, I can always figure out German. Like, there's dictionaries, there's lots of resources, but all the knowledge in the world about German is not going to make me write well in English if, it's not going to make my translation sound good if I'm not a good writer myself. So translators also need to be writers. And likewise, if you're going to be adapting from like a page to a screen, you have to, it's not enough to just love the source text. You are, or to know it really well, you also have to be like, you also have to know what works on screen. So to be good at making TV, in conclusion, you have to be good at making TV. A stunning conclusion. I'm going to be going on tour with my TED Talk on that one, I think.
Well, and I think it's really clear that when we look at the adaptation of the show, that Joe Cornish and the whole team at Complete Fiction, they not only knew their source text really well, but they also happened to be really good at making TV. So they had to make a lot of choices in their adaptation. And it's clear that they were really intentional about those choices, even if there maybe were some that we didn't all love, which we'll get to later in this episode. But even the things that we maybe didn't love, it was clear they did them all for a reason. So we'll talk about all of that.
Yeah, because the thing is, like, change is inevitable in adaptation. So no translation is ever going to be the book in English. It's going to be a book in English, which is really closely connected to the original. So likewise, no adaptation is ever going to be the show of the book. The show is going to be the show of the show. It's going to be its own thing. There's going to be stuff from the source that inevitably gets lost because of the constraints of making stuff on screen and just because of the tastes and interests and preferences of the screenwriters and adapters. But there's also going to be new stuff that the source didn't have or couldn't have, like, a soundtrack. A book can't have a soundtrack unless you're Stephanie Meyer and you post a playlist and suddenly everyone's really into, what are their names? They're like Queen, but they're not Queen.
Muse.
They're better. Muse. Thank you.
They're better than Queen. Disagree, but okay.
Listen, I actually hate Queen. I'm so sorry.
I have never known this.
This is the thing that gets me cancelled. You guys know this. All I like is like, you know, kind of dark 80s alt rock. So this show is like catnip for me.
We'll talk more about that later. But yeah. I'm still reeling from the Queen revelation. But
yeah, this is a whole new episode now. I'm sorry, we need to get to the bottom of this.
Yeah.
There's just not interesting music.
Oh my gosh. Well, but to talk about things being interesting, I know for me, one of the big things I used to evaluate in adaptation is like, do I find the changes that they make interesting, even if they aren't different from the source material? And I think that's definitely true of the Lockwood and Co adaptation.
Yeah.
But everything we're going to go into in here in this episode of the pod is said obviously with the utmost respect for complete fiction, Joe Cornish, and everyone involved with the show, the actors, all the designers, etc. We love the show to pieces, and we wouldn't be here without it. So, but we do have, of course, some thoughts because we are the podcast of people who read too much into things. So let's go for that.
Yes, we have thoughts. So let's start with places we think the show really excelled at translating from page to screen directly. So one thing with the film TV medium is that you can do a lot more storytelling through visuals and also through sound, which we just alluded to. So for example, though, using the actors' faces and body language to give you the emotional impact of what's happening to the characters is, you know, it's a shorthand and it's something we're used to, you know, reading emotions off people's faces. We're not actually used to reading people's thoughts the way you do in a book. And so I actually think that lets us into their world in a way that's really unique and compelling. We've already talked about like the cast and how amazing they are and the chemistry between the actors, although maybe it bears repeating just in every episode we'll start with, and they were amazing. But also just everything around them really helps paint the picture of who they are, the world they live in. And in some ways it's easier to build that world because you can let the sets and the props and the costumes do so much of the heavy lifting.
The sets were really immaculate, especially Portland Row. It's pretty much exactly on par with how I imagined it reading the books, and I just think all the details in it are incredible. And there's also some other really great sets in the show.
Oh yeah, the set decoration of Portland Row is fantastic. All the stuff they put up on the walls, that library is so cozy. I love Portland Row, especially the kitchen. They made that like the heart of the house, which it wasn't in the books, and it is in the show, and it's such a wonderful little space for them to be in.
Why does it have two cookers though? Just wondering.
It's an aga cooker. That's just how they look.
No, I thought it had like a gas cooker and an aga cooker. I'm sorry, I'm tangenting.
The funny thing for me is that the refrigerator is so small. Sorry, the fridge is tiny. Like
that is such a British thing. Like all of our fridges are so small.
Normal size of a fridge because we don't have to fit all our like big gulps or whatever that you guys drink in there.
You don't have flats of soda in your fridge.
Or Big Macs. We don't have a fridge full of Big Macs.
Big Macs don't go in the fridge.
I don't know. I'm not American.
You don't have a fridge in your basement just for your drinks like we do at my house?
Who has a basement?
I've never tried this exotic food known as burger. I'd love to someday if I ever go to America.
Oh my god.
Right, sorry, so much to cut there. However, Portland Row is perfect. While I'm tangenting, someone should have showed Ali the normal way to use an aga. He's wasting so much heat in that scene where he's cooking, like when Lockwood is giving Lucy the tour of the house, and he's got like one pot on each hob. It's ridiculous. It hurts me physically. Anyway, sets. Who loves sets?
So, what are some other sets that we think were really good besides Portland Row?
I really like Coombe Carey personally. I think they did a great job with that. I think it's the exterior of the house has that good uncanny feeling, and you know, the interior is so like lush and full of detail. Like the set designers really went nuts with that. And one really cool thing they did at Coombe Carey was they got that shot from the book cover. Like, so I think, I'm not sure if it was the original Screaming Staircase cover, is the three of them going up the stairs and like there's kind of this spooky light filtering down, and they
very original.
That is the original. Anyway, they reproduced that like shot exactly in the TV show, and it's a really cool nod to the OG fans.
That's a really fun note.
And it's just such a good shot. Like, even if you don't know, it's such a good shot. It's iconic.
It's really memorable. Like, I think it struck me even before I knew what it was referring to.
I really like the crypt set that they did in the final episode. And I like it more because I've actually been in there. It's a cafe.
It's a cafe?
Very different
it's
vibes.
It's a cafe, yeah. There's a whole community centre and stuff down there. It's a cafe. You could just wander in.
They just took out the tables.
Sorry, where is this? I'm going to take notes for when I visit London.
St. Martin in the Fields. It's right next to Trafalgar Square.
Oh, very convenient. Nice.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
But it's not creepy at all in real life, but obviously it's super creepy. I think they did wonders with it.
Yeah, so that's just, I mean, another great example of how great the set vibes were. But another thing I really loved about the show and the vibes were just like how they really show like the teenagers being teenagers. Like they have like their shenanigans that they're doing. They have the goofiness and the dry humor, and they have that great heart of found family in the midst of it all, where they really only have each other to rely on, which is one of my favorite things in all forms of media, and definitely one of the reasons why I was drawn to Lockwood and Co. And I really appreciate, particularly in the dialogue, that the banter is so good and that they're allowed to swear in the show, because in the books they never get to because it's middle grade. Well, they don't really get to, especially in the American versions. They edit out even more. So it's very satisfying to hear them actually talk like teens.
Yeah.
I think in the books they talk like teens, but I also think because you don't get the tone or anything really through the books, do you? So people just say, oh, they're so mean to each other. No, that's how teenagers talk.
They do and they don't, like the words they use. I mean, I think you guys have already had this conversation about genres, haven't you? But like sometimes they say things like, you know, Lockwood in the books asking Lucy, how's your bottom? After they get thrown out of after they get thrown out of Winkman's is a little bit 12-year-old. Anyway.
Yes, the banter is immaculate.
The one thing I think the show does really, really well is exposition. Like, I really like how a lot of like the background lore is sitting there in the intro. Obviously in the books Lucy just kind of fills in the gaps of herself in her narration. Can't do that in a show, so they put it in the intro, which I think is kind of like a stroke of genius. But it also kind of let me feel a little bit smug, because I'm one of those people who never ever ever skips an intro. And like months after the show came out, I would occasionally see people say like, I finally watched the intro and now it makes so much sense.
Oh no. No, you have to watch the intro. The intro's so good.
Yeah, and there's so many intros now that are basically, they don't even matter, but Lockwood and Co. It actually does, and it really makes use of the time and space so well.
The music's so good as well. Like the music they picked, it just kind of screams Lucy.
It's also very reminiscent of the X-Files. I don't know if I've already said that before, but that music that they're using in the intro is very X-Files. And then also just the kind of rapid visuals of like, ooh, something creepy was happening, and news articles and all of that is also the intro in the X-Files.
Really?
I'm going to make you all sit down and watch the first episode, the pilot.
As homework.
Future podcast episode
We'll live
comparing
react.
to the X-Files.
That actually sounds fun.
All right. Speaking of openings and setting the scene and exposition and banter, I want to talk a little bit about the very first scene of Lockwood and Co. Speaking of people who skip the intros, I've seen people be like, what scene should I show someone to convince them to watch Lockwood and Co? And I'm like, the first scene. The Complete Fiction has done your job for you. That first scene should sell you on this show. And for me, it absolutely did. They pack so much into that scene. And it's lifted more or less directly out of the book. Like, they made some changes, but the changes they made were just to pack a little bit more punch in there, a little bit more information, a little bit more character information. So in the opening 3 minutes, which is Lucy and Lockwood get out of the cab through to, like, they open the door to Hope House, we learn that these kids are here to do a job. They go through their kit, their strategies. We get a lot about, like, their relationship to each other. Lockwood is in charge. He's charming, he's funny, he's good with clients. Lucy is a little bit awkward, she's a little bit new here, but also, like, competent. She seems competent. And I love her dry humor and, like, kind of poking fun at Lockwood in that opening bit. And then that conversation they have with Mrs. Hope, which doesn't happen quite that way in the book. But they're able to then tell you all this stuff about, like, you know, the kids have been hired to come here and get rid of something. You don't actually know what yet, but you're, like, building tension on, like, oh, there's something creepy going on. But then you learn, like, oh, this is a recent thing, and, you know, I feel sorry for your generation, all of that. And they just put so much into this opening scene, and then you get that last shot of Lucy and Lockwood looking at each other. You get the connection between them before they go into the creepy haunted house. All in the first 3 minutes. It's incredible. I don't know how they did it.
It is absolutely brilliant.
Good at making TV?
Good at making TV, yeah.
Exactly.
Or the black magic?
When I first watched Lockwood and Co, I actually didn't like go through Netflix and pick something and read the blurb. I think I was working. I was sitting on my sofa with my laptop on my lap, and my husband was watching TV. And so I had no idea what he picked, and I just kind of looked up, and it was this scene where these two people are getting out of a car and all of this, and I had literally no idea what was going on, but it hooked me. And I was just kind of like, what's going on? Until Lockwood then goes, let's go find ourselves a ghost. It's like, oh, that's it. Everything. That's...
It's so good. So solid.
That's such a great way to experience it for the first time. Like, because I was so thoroughly spoiled because I came to the show through, like, GIFs on Tumblr. So I already had a good idea of what it was about. And then I watched a trailer and, you know, so I had been spoiled for the concept, and coming into it, like, with absolutely no idea of the concept, that must have been so cool. I'm very jealous of that experience.
It was pretty cool. It did make me kind of terrified of ghost touch, though. Because, I don't know, it just said, like, ghost touch kills. And then I spent, like, the whole show, like, on tenterhooks, like, one tiny touch and they're dead, one tiny touch and they're dead, one tiny touch and they're... Why aren't they more scared?
And then you went and read the books, and you're like, wait, it's not that bad. It's fine.
It's like, yeah. Now I can watch the rest of the show. It's not so scary.
Yeah. That is a thing they changed, right? The ghost touch. But before we get too much into the changes, I do want to mention again how well they clearly knew the books, like just how hyper faithful some scenes are, like especially obviously for book fans. The interview scene, it's so recognizable. It follows the scene in the Screaming Staircase just beat for beat. I think most of the dialogue is the same, like even like the stage directions are the same. It's really, really faithful, and it's just lovely. It just works really well. I think that's probably just a scene that works well on page and on screen. That's a phrase that you can translate directly.
I think that having these moments of really perfect fidelity help then when they depart a little bit in other places, because you're still really grounded in what was in the books and the characters and all of that.
Yes, that is precisely it. Like, even when they change something, they'd often like give a nod to the audience, like the bit before they break into Winkman's. Lucy suggests coming back the next day, which is what they do in the books.
Which is what they do in the book.
So they give this little explicit wink, like, we read them, we know what's happening here, we're doing this on purpose. But as you say, because they are so grounded in, I guess they had a good instinct for what was important in the source, that these changes, you can make them, and you I suppose you can trust them as a fan. Like, okay, yes, you love this, I can trust you to make this change because you're going to give me something fun.
Yeah, it's very much hanging a lantern on your change there. All right, so let's talk some more about changes that they made, because they did make quite a few, and for the most part they're subtle, or they're just like taking something and simplifying it a little bit, but some really stand out and some were excellent. So what are some of our actual favorite changes they made from the books to the show?
So I'm a huge fan of kind of the tone shift of the show. It's much darker, it's much grittier, and that really works for me. And maybe it's partly because I experienced the show first, but I really like that shift, and I think that goes well with the characters being aged up slightly.
So I'm somebody who doesn't really like the kind of grim dark vibes. Not necessarily in the show, just in general. I'm not a fan of everything having to be really grim and really dark. And I think the books are fairly dark themselves. They've got this Victorian kind of vibe, which is kind of like there's a lot of poverty in the books, and it's just kind of haunting the edges. But I do think that the show balanced it really nicely. They kind of gave it that 80s kind of vibe, and it was darker, and it was different, but it wasn't like, it didn't feel dark for the sake of being edgy. Like it worked really well.
Maybe that one scene with the electric chair.
Yeah, okay, that was a bit over the top, wasn't it? Honestly, the whole Winkman's thing, the whole Winkman's bit, I think, was quite over the top.
I mean, it is very dark, but I don't know. Again, it's a fun change. I think
She should have lit them up. I was annoyed by that. I was watching it going, Lucy, light them up because they will come for you. We all know they will come for you. A dead man doesn't come for revenge. Kill him.
Okay, so none of us are ever crossing Natasha again.
Seriously, I'm scared now.
You can put whatever you want in the outline, Nat, I promise. Don't burn my house down.
Oh my god. It's good we Lizzie and I live on a different continent.
Yeah.
I actually have all of their addresses, so, you know.
Yeah. Listen, you can't say like that to me. That's imperialism. But, like, they definitely... Getting back to the actual subject at hand, like, I think it's... I'm gonna say something really stupid. It's a bright darkness. Like, the darkness is all, like, lit up by these kind of bright, garish lights, by the light of the skull, by the light of the ghost lamps, by the light of the other ghosts. It's a bright darkness.
It's like really dark eyeshadow, really dark mascara with super, like, tons of body glitter. That's the kind of...
That is the vibe.
Isn't it?
That's the vibe. And that's also an extremely 80s vibe.
It is. As our friend Sir Rupert Gale shows with his lovely eyeliner.
Yes.
But there are no shoulder pads. Where are the shoulder pads?
They should have committed to the bit. Lucy with shoulder pads. Are any of us ready?
Penelope with shoulder pads.
If anyone would power dress, it would be Penelope.
I think, though, that there was a lot of really intentionality there. It was like, we've gone through some of the 80s, and some things have kind of progressed to modern day, but some things are still stuck in the 80s. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I was actually thinking that even though their vibe is different from the books, they clearly chose something and they stuck with it through the whole book. So it feels very consistent and intentional the whole way through.
Yeah.
It feels almost early 90s to me, really. More than 80s.
But the music's very 80s. Like, The Cure,
Yeah.
Bauhaus, that's pure, like, 80s. It's actually, that is the reason I watched the show, incidentally. Because when I watched that trailer, they played The Clash, and I was like, oh my god, this was written for me! And then I watched like the first episode, and 10 minutes into the first episode, they start playing Bela Lugosi's Dead, which is something of like a family joke in my house. Like, it's so over the top. Like, we definitely had a phase where we were all yelling Bella's not dead at each other. But anyway, that really influenced my decision to watch the show. But if I had come from the books to the show, I would have been really surprised, I think, to see that they picked that aesthetic, like that they picked that music. It's not something I would ever think of. You know, if I just picked up the books fresh now, I don't think, oh yeah, The Cure is what this needs. But it works so well. Like, it's brilliant. So I'm so glad they did make that choice.
I just wonder how they got to that choice.
Well, I did talk to Joe Cornish at a fan meet about this, because I was like gushing to him, like, oh my gosh, I love this music too. Or like, I can't believe you chose this music. This is my favorite music. And he was like, oh yeah, when I was in school, all the guys who bullied me were into this sort of music. So I chose it as a bit of like an FU to them. And I was like, what are you talking about? I was mystified. I think I just kind of smiled and went, that's nice. Can you sign this picture for me? But I did, like, I think I understand what he means now. He was reclaiming it, you know. He was taking their thing and he was making it into something that he could like, and that's I'm really glad that he made that choice, because I think it's incredible. I can't imagine the show without it.
All right, so speaking of things that they did decide to progress through from the 80s to a more modern day, and a lot of people have talked about this already, so we'll probably just mention it really quick, which is the diversity in the casting. Which, I mean, I love the whole cast, but it is really nice to see, because the books are very white. They're just very white. But it's nice to see George, Flo, Barnes, Lucy's team up north, all a lot more diverse. And we got more women. We got Joplin was changed from the books, and Ellie was changed from the books, and then Wade is just added as a character. There's kind of like a, I don't know, parade of assistants to Barnes who are male and probably wearing suits, and that's all we know about them.
One thing about the casting choices, like they always say, they say it's an Eleanor Roosevelt quote, but you're not sure if it actually is. They say that for a woman to be considered just as good as a man, she has to be twice as good, but luckily this isn't difficult. I do think that all of the more diverse actors that they brought on were absolutely stellar. You know, they knocked it out of the park. Like, especially Ali is obviously the obvious one. He looks nothing like George in the books. They even changed the character quite a bit. That's George. Like, you look at him, that's George. It's just immediately recognizable as George. Barnes as well. Just immediately recognizable as Barnes.
I don't know how they did the casting. I know that for Ali, they said that they just kind of like opened the door to like anyone with anything close to the right kind of level of weirdness, and then picked the person who they thought, you know, embodied George the best, which has got to be the best way to do it, because it really worked.
I think it's definitely the best way to do it. I go to quite a lot of West End stuff, and you do sometimes, like, you see like people who are visibly disabled, or people who are like playing, like, there was one thing that I saw was like one guy, and he had 4 brothers, and one of the brothers, just a random one of the brothers, is a black guy, everybody else is white. And at first, obviously, you're like, okay, is he meant to be adopted? Is he like a neighbour's kid? Is he, what's going on there? And no, he's just meant to be one of the brothers. He was far and away the best actor on that stage. Far and away. So, yeah, when they do like the open casting call, they just go for the person who's the best fit. They get the best fit. Doesn't matter what they look like. And I like that. I think it's much better than whatever they used to do. We get much better actors. And it helps, like you said, it brings London more to life, because I don't look out my window and see a bunch of white people. That's not what London is. London is more diverse. And even if you say, okay, the problem curtailed immigration and all of that, we still had a hell of a lot of immigration before the problem would have kicked in. So not everybody would have picked up sticks and gone home. Lots of people, this was their home. They stayed.
And I like that it's, you know, they don't make a deal of it at all. It's just there. And, you know, it's the world that they live in.
I mean, that's life.
Exactly. There's one thing, though, that it seems like they intentionally decided to focus on a little bit more, and that's class. And we've talked about class a few times when recording the podcast, but I think most of the time it ends up getting cut because we end up on such a tangent about class. But I think for once we can actually talk about it.
We can talk about it a little bit. I'm always kind of hesitant to talk about class, because class is as touchy a subject here as like racism is in America.
That's so fascinating to me.
It is it's something that I don't want to kind of dabble in. But the show definitely talks about class a lot more, which I really like, because the books kind of skirt around the theme. Again, it's a very touchy subject. It should have been more of a theme in the books, just from Lucy's background, especially she's North. There's a North-South divide, all of this. She should have faced a lot of prejudice. All of that was not in the books. Whereas it seems to be a little bit more in the show, which I like. One thing that's interesting, though, is that one of the ways they kind of emphasised it was they made Lockwood much more of an upper middle class person than he is in the books. And like... his background is, but he was orphaned at 6, raised by his sister, who then carked it when she was 9. So, you know, he was roughing it essentially for 7 or 8 years, and wasn't exactly, you know, enjoying that upper middle class upbringing. And he was quite, in his actions, he's quite common in a lot of ways. But in the show, he's not. And I just kind of wonder, what was the deal with that?
Yeah, and it's clearly intentional, because they have it in the dialogue. He says, you know, oh, I'm practically a serf, and Flo talks about him being minted. So they did it intentionally, but...
He wants the pre-pleb part of the graveyard and things like that. And it's like, look at the people beside you. What are you talking about?
Lucy gets offended. That was interesting to me as an American who has no idea what they're talking about. But I could tell the tension was there, and I kind of got why. So they did that really well, actually. But I was wondering if maybe part of this is because when you're going to cast and you're going to be on screen and you're going, you know, you have to have wardrobe and they're going to have a distinctive accent, whatever it is, you have to make a choice. Whereas in the book, it can be left a little bit vague. It's going to be much harder to leave it vague in the show. Maybe that's why.
In the book, I think he kind of code switches with his dialogue. Sometimes, like when he's talking to clients and stuff, he uses words which are more like what the accent that he has in the show. But a lot of the time when he's just like pottering around the kitchen or anything, like he talks the same as George and Lucy.
Oh, that makes sense.
So
that's interesting. Not something I would have picked up on as an American.
I mean, he would have been running about with a gravedigger since he was 9. So that's one thing. Like in the show, they're like, oh, he'd never talk to a gravedigger, and he does seem awkward around them. It's like, but your gravedigger Sykes' boy, like, where was that going? I don't know.
Well, one thing, as an American, I very much appreciated the increased focus on in the show. I feel like it's just my thing now that I'm like, let's talk about feelings. But I loved that the show focused so much on mental health and trauma. Like my first watch through of it, that was one of the things that really stuck out to me, how well done I thought that was and how honest I thought that was. And in the show, we see, you know, Lockwood have a panic attack. We see this direct acknowledgement of experiencing depression and suicidal ideation from both Lockwood and Lucy at different
That is
moments.
just so not British.
I was gonna say, what are you trying to say about Americans? We all have panic attacks and depression and suicide. I mean, we do, but
Therapists, you do. You all have therapists.
I mean, I do have a therapist, yes.
so do I.
Some of my best friends are therapists.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine. It's fine. I think there has been just really a real movement in media in general to address mental health more directly since even the books were published. And I think that is something I really like that we get to see in the show.
I do love that Lucy is so much less emotionally repressed in the show, because if she had been that emotionally repressed in the show, like you'd never see it. But having, you know, especially with Ruby, she's such a good actress, and seeing all of that kind of trauma and pain on her face is so beautiful. And Lockwood too. Both of those characters suffer really beautifully on screen.
So beautifully. Like, just even that scene at Tyburn Gallows where, you know, Lucy says all the stuff about her team and how sometimes she wishes she'd rather be dead. Like, book Lucy would probably have never said those things,
No.
but it's also really satisfying as a viewer to see her vocalize those things and for them to, like, share that moment.
Can I make a translation tangent? There's a phenomenon in translation called explicitation, which is where when you're going from the source language to the target language, and there's something that's implied, that might be implied in the source language, which isn't implied by using the same word in the target language, sometimes you will make that word, you'll use something more explicit. You'll add in an explanation that's not there. So
You'll turn one word into like a sentence or something
exactly,
like that.
exactly. So this is again to continue our like fidelity, fluency metaphor. This is like one of those trade-offs you have to make, which is like in the books we know that Lucy's a super emotional person because we get that dialogue. So how do you convey that, or sorry, we get that interior monologue, I mean, how do you convey that when we can't hear her interior monologue? You have to have her actually act it out. So that's
Absolutely.
that's a little bit of the, it's a gain and a loss simultaneously. It's a changing something about how she expresses herself, but also we gain, like, you know, that beautiful, beautiful scene at Tyburn Gallows. So it's a good tension. It's a fun tension.
They also, I mean, I think they knew that this was going to be true in the show. And so, again, they leaned into it. And, for example, they gave her Nori, right? And so we get to see her relationship with Nori, which is so beautiful. That's just not in the books even a little bit. And then we get to see her lose Nori, which is super sad. And lets us empathize with her a lot more in that moment.
Yeah.
Well, and we also get Lucy recording the tapes to Nori.
Oh, yeah.
Which that's when we kind of get some of her, like, snarky narration that we get in the books. Like, I think about her initial, like, evaluations of George and Lockwood all the time. Like some posh, what is it? Some posh guy who thinks he's God's gift and his weird mate and...
Yeah.
His weird antisocial mate.
His weird antisocial mate, which is not something we would have gotten to hear Lucy say in any other, if they hadn't added in that narration that she's doing through the tapes.
Not sure Book Lucy would have described Lockwood as God's gift, though. George would have definitely been the weird antisocial mate, but I don't think she'd have described Lockwood as this posh guy who thinks he's God's gift. She's just so into the hero worship, isn't she, when she meets him?
Well, they put in more tension between Lucy and Lockwood, and like she stands up to him more in the show. There's a lot that they kind of change about their relationship, and I think we'll talk about that
She's
more maybe
older.
in it. Yes, we'll talk about that more in a different episode because I think we want to have a whole nother episode on where they were going with the characters and like what they were going to do in season 2. Because if we put that in this episode, I think we already know we're going to be at 3 hours, which is not acceptable. Some people have to go to
We're
bed.
gonna have to talk about timeline, and you guys have banned me from talking about timeline. But a lot of these character changes are because they squished up the timeline. And
If
they're
Natasha
like
says the
direct
word
results of
time
it.
one more time, the sniper in the building opposite her is going to take her out.
There is no building opposite me. It's just a train station. Ha.
Her cat is going to bite her really hard. Sorry, I couldn't say that without corpsing.
Oh my god. Well, and I think another thing that they did change in the show versus the books is the whole adding the plot line where Kip's asks Lucy out and then Lockwood is jealous. And I think that is something that does kind of is different from the books, but I think it's nice because we get to see kind of that a little bit of a different dynamic between Lucy and Lockwood where in the books we only see Lucy being very jealous. But in the show, we get to see Lockwood being jealous, which is very personally satisfying for me.
I can say this because I don't have a sniper across the street from me. I think that was also motivated by the timeline because you have to push Lockwood to give her that necklace. They haven't known each other that long, the way that they have in the books. So you're like really ratcheting up the tension.
Like a week and a half.
But it feels really natural in the show.
Hello, I've known you for a week and a half. Here's a priceless family heirloom. Yeah, doesn't mean anything.
No, it's fine. She doesn't know, so it's okay. It balances their relationship a little bit more, which I do like.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I think, yeah, maybe that's another thing that's kind of explicit here that maybe in the books is implicit that, like, for example, okay, this is jumping ahead and I'm sorry, but like Lockwood's reaction about Harold Mailer in The Hollow Boy, that's a little bit jealous.
Oh,
he
very
does. Or no,
much.
that's not the Hollow Boy, that's the Creeping Shadow, sorry. But that's a little bit jealous. So he does have that, like, trait, definitely. And there's nothing to say that, like, that whole scene with him seeing Kipps and Lucy outside the window, okay, obviously the Kipps Lyle thing didn't happen, but in the books, but Lockwood's motivations there are completely obscure to us. So making them explicit is just, it's really fun. And there's also, you know, there's no reason not to do it.
Yeah. But there was a scene with Kipps and Lucy in the books, though. On the doorstep.
Oh, that's true, yeah. He just doesn't ask her out.
He doesn't ask her out.
No, but he asked her to leave Lockwood and Co. and join his team.
Yes, okay, yeah.
Which, you know, Lockwood's like, you know, you're working for me. We're officially family forever now.
Yeah.
So, same diff to him, isn't
Yeah.
it? Same diff.
Yeah.
I just read that scene earlier today, and Book Lucy insults the way Kip smells in her narration, which was delightful to read.
Choice.
She's like, he smells overpowering and floral. And
But he leans in close, doesn't he? She's
That's
standing
true.
on the doorstep and he leans in close enough to her that she can smell him. So if Lockwood happens to be watching.
Yeah.
yeah.
Who's to say he didn't have that reaction?
It's really a shame we didn't have smell-o-vision in the TV show.
I know. We missed out.
Just every time Kipps comes on screen, spray a big can of Lynx directly in your face, and I'm sure that'll reproduce the experience. I think that's Axe for you Americans.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. Or Axe.
Yeah. No, I think it's called Lynx over here. Yeah. Anyway.
All right, so I'm going to switch topics now a little bit. I want to talk about some of the changes they made that we maybe weren't as fond of. So any changes they made from the books to the show that you guys have a real sticking point with?
The mill.
The mill. Why?
The mill. One, they changed the name.
Why did they
But
change the name?
anyway, yeah, why did they change the name? Well, the only place that's Whiffburn is like on the other side of the country. But still, that's not even Whiffburn, that's the River Whiff. Anyway, my biggest pet peeve of the mill is actually not the name. It's one of the last lines in the mill scenes is, I drew my sword and ran towards the screams. And that line just tells you so much about Lucy's character in that one line. Like, she's standing, pitch black room, door behind her's been slammed shut, there's no help coming from behind. In front of her, everybody's gone around a corner, they're out of sight, but she can hear the screaming. And she knows bad things are happening, and okay, this sucks, sword out, off I go. And in the show, it's like she's instead very helpless, and she doesn't have any agency. And I do like that they added in like Paul telling her, save yourself, shut the door, save yourself for me. And she does it because this parallels very nicely that scene in the office at the end of The Empty Grave where Lockwood says, go live for me, Lucy, save yourself, run. And she doesn't. There's that brilliant parallel there.
Yeah, I love that. Gives me chills.
But parallel aside, Lucy was much more active in the mill in the books, and I think that's just so much better for her character in a way, because she's not this scared tiny little girl. She's like the girl who's like, she's scared but she does it anyway. And even in the show she's much more scared but she does it anyway. And another thing that they kind of did was like the adults in the books were just much less awful And that's again in the mill. Like Jacob's reaction in the books in the mill is like, well, Lucy, I can pull the team back if you want me to, but you need to give me something a bit more concrete than you're not sure, it feels a bit weird. And she was like, oh.
Yeah, it's fairly reasonable in the book.
Right, it's quite reasonable. When you read it, you're like, yeah, actually, you do need something a bit more. Like, are you sure, Lucy? Oh, I'm not sure, sir. I'm not too sure. Do you want to come check it out? And it's like, yeah, I'd be kind of annoyed at that too. He should be inside. He used to be inside, which he never was in the show. In the show, he's always just standing at the door. Off you go. Hope you don't die.
In the show, he closes the door behind them and shuts them in. Like,
yeah, he comes in the show and shuts the door.
It's so much worse.
It's brutal to watch in the show.
In the books, he has no idea until Lucy breaks out.
yeah.
Whether or not you believe that, I don't know. He says he doesn't hear any screaming or anything, but her last view of him was miles away out the open door. She could just see the cigarette kind of being lowered and raised, you know?
He's more neglectful.
Yeah, this is much more intentional.
Yeah.
Oh, and her mum is terrible in the show as well, isn't she?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
She's so bad.
She's horrendous in the show. And in the books, it's kind of you know, she's not a saint, but she's not telling her to go and beg for her job back and all that. And it's just
And the slap.
Adults in the show are just so much worse.
It's a little bit one-dimensional.
They really are. It's almost not always believable, especially because we're all adults. And we're looking at the way that adults in the show behave, and we're like, no, what?
Can we get a little bit more nuance in there?
The bit with the nurse actually always cracks me up because she says, oh, Lucy Lockwood. And Lucy says, oh, no, that's not my name. She goes, oh, I called your mum. And she goes, oh, does she know where I am? And she goes, she didn't ask where you are. And I'm like, well, you thought she was Lucy Lockwood, so who the hell did you call? You called some random woman, surnamed Lockwood, and said, your daughter Lucy's in the hospital. And they said, I think you have the wrong number. And they said, no, your daughter's in the hospital. And they go, okay, thank you very much for your call, and hung up.
Listen, sometimes it's not about making sense. It's about complete and total fan service, and that's okay. I am a fan, and I would like to be serviced.
I mean, I also love that moment because, who does? I mean, I just think of Ruby's face when she's like, "No, Lockwood's my partner." It's so good.
It's like, that's not better. Yeah.
Yep.
Why is she not okay with him being her boss? He is her boss, and she doesn't want to admit it in that moment, which I find very funny.
It's
Is
very
it because she
funny.
doesn't want to admit her boss is 17?
Because she thinks he's so amateurish.
Well, and she's also
Yeah, she doesn't have the best opinion of him right then.
no, she doesn't. But she's also do people think we're married? Question mark. There's a lot going on.
Oh.
On the topic of fan service, though, there is one adult that I think they did really well with, and that is Barnes. Because Barnes in the books has a little bit of a glow up, right at the very, very end when he decides, screw all this, I'm actually going to come and save the kids and yada, yada, yada.
Leather jacket.
He, steals a motorbike and ride his leather jacket and all of this stuff, right? Very cool. They decided to skip all of the dowdy part, which I love that. Thank you very much, Mr. Joe Cornish. They just gave us hot Barnes off the bat.
Oh, yeah, and the leather jacket.
Yeah.
Which, at the very end, Lockwood's like, oh, that's great, you should keep that. He just has that from the beginning in the show.
I love that for him.
Exactly.
I love that for him.
If you are over the age of 25, Barnes is hands down the hottest man on that show.
The rest is are you eating enough? Have you done your homework?
I know.
Exactly.
Barnes looks like a man who could get a mortgage.
Yes.
Cameron is very pretty. Ali is very pretty, okay? In 10 years' time, they're going to be hot as hell. But right now, it's you are so pretty, but let me, make you a cup of tea and make sure. Have you had your vitamins
Yeah,
today?
tuck you in.
I've got the chewable vitamins if you want some. Yeah, they're so baby. Very good at their jobs, but they're still so young. Barnes? No.
Yeah.
Barnes, let's go get a drink. You're paying.
Well, and Barnes is more competent. I actually think Barnes is more believable and more competent in the show. We see some of his perspective and his frustration with Lockwood and Co. that
Yes.
is very understandable. Whereas in the books, it always feels like he's just very jaded and doesn't care and isn't putting in any effort at this point until the very, very end.
See,
So
I think in the books...
I do love Barnes in the show.
In the books, I think he's got his hands tied by the system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In many
Yeah.
ways. And in the books, he's already got a long-standing relationship with Lockwood and George. So he's sort of been assigned to their agency since the time Lockwood set it up, basically. And I think he has constantly tried to get them shut down or to have a supervisor or something assigned to them so that they stop being idiot teenagers with no supervision. And he's failed because everything's by the letter and his hands are tied.
And he kind of takes refuge in that bureaucracy as well. Like, he just, I think, like, it's such a horrible system that all the adults in it, like, the good adults, the closest we get to good adults, seem to be really crushed by the system in the books. At least in the show they feel a lot more exploitative. Like in the books, for example, there's that scene with the canaries, you know, the kids who have like the psychic talent, and they tell the big muscly guys what to do. They're the ones with the talent, so they're the ones who know things. Outside the relic auction, there's like this little kid telling these massive henchmen, no, you gotta let them in, they've got good stuff. And that wouldn't really be realistic in our world, but you know, you'd think that if you were being abused by someone who relied on you to keep them alive, you might be tempted to let the ghost touch them, like, just a little bit. But
Maybe more than a little bit.
yeah, I mean, it's like, there's, like, the interesting thing about the whole no talent thing is that it changes the power dynamic between adults and children. And suddenly adults have to depend on children, which means that in the book world, they have a lot of autonomy, and they have a lot more power than the kids in our world. But I think, like, it's one thing to have that in a book, to have, like, you know, a 15-year-old, a person in a book who says, I'm 15 and I'm out every night fighting ghosts. You're like, fine. But I think showing that on screen is maybe, it's more difficult. There's going to be a bit of dissonance in the viewer between what they're seeing and what they're being told they're seeing. So I think maybe that's why they were maybe forced to simplify it a little bit into this kind of forcing kids to work is terrible thing. Whereas the books, it's a little bit more nuanced.
I think a lot of the changes that they made for the show that I'm less enthusiastic about all come down to a lack of nuance. I listened to some of the screenwriters say that they had to make choices to simplify some bits due to time constraints or due to budget constraints, like the bigger staff house rat ghost, which is so cool in the books, and they just couldn't afford it in the show, which I get. But I think at times we really lost some depth because of the lack of nuance. One that really bothers me is in Coombe Carey, the monks. Because in the books, the barons wanted the monks' land, and so they claimed that they were devil worshippers, and then they straight up murdered them. And then but we know that they actually weren't devil worshippers, they were just poor victims. In the show, they are devil worshipping monks who committed suicide. And it's like, well, if that's the case, why are they ghosts? They committed suicide. They want to be dead. They wouldn't come back. I don't understand. But also just you miss some of the nice parallels there and the themes, and it makes so much more sense when you have that little bit of extra depth there.
And there's some other, like, smaller details, I think, that do get cut out in Coombe Carey. The one that really bothers me is just there's the moment in the books where, like, Lockwood pulls Lucy back from the edge of the well. He's got his arms around her, and he's, like, telling her, no, Lucy, that's not the way it's going to be, which is such, like, a moment in the books, and that just gets cut completely from the show, which maybe it messed with the flow, but I miss it every time.
Okay, so Meg's thing is not a lack of nuance, it's a lack of Lockwood.
I mean, if that's not on brand for me, I don't know what is.
That moment is so intimate. Like, his lips are right by her ear. He's basically breathing the words into her ear. But I do kind of like that they included George in it in the show, because in the books, he's just kind of dying on the floor and everyone's just ignoring him.
Yeah, I imagine that's why it was changed. But
A compromise I could envision, but again, I'm not a screenwriter, so I don't know if this would work, is like her having that moment of like falling over, him grabbing her and yelling no, and there might be a second where they're holding on to each other. That would have been like a nice, if I were writing the scene, that's how I would have done it, but I'm not writing the scene. I'm a translator.
I would guess it's because a few seconds later we've got the scene with them holding hands.
Ah, that's true.
And Oi wears his slap.
yeah.
And I think it would have been just too close in the show. Again, time constraint.
Yeah.
You can't have those two moments right next to each other, so you had to pick one.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And that is a good moment.
They skipped the bit where Lucy has the vision before she wakes up. Remember, she sees her sister, she sees Lockwood, she sees Annabelle Ward all smiling at her, and she thinks, well, this sounds like a load of bullshit. And she just stares at them until they all disappear. and then she wakes up.
Oh my god.
But you can't have that because now we've got that at the very end in the last episode. She has those visions. So you can't do that twice either.
Yeah, she also has that vision with Annabelle Ward where
Yeah.
she's like holding the
that's
flowers
true.
in the water or something, doesn't she? But they added that in and they took out the bit where Lucy's like, yeah, there is no way that when I die I'm going to end up in some lovely cloudy place with all these people I love smiling at me. That's just not going to happen.
Well, if I've learned anything from doing my own version of the adaptation, it's that when you are strapped for time, every scene, every beat that you choose has to do double or triple duty. So
Yeah.
you can't have a beat that's just about Lucy is kind of like, no, Death's not like that. It has to also further the plot. It has to, like, anything that only does one thing is going to get cut. It's a little bit like a kitchen drawer. Any implement that only does one thing doesn't deserve space in my kitchen.
You would not like my kitchen.
Or
I
my
do think
is right.
I do think it's worth saying that it's not that a lot of these things were cut. They were just moved somewhere else where they could
Yeah.
do double duty. Exactly. So yeah.
Speaking of implements that only do one thing in the show, this is actually kind of the opposite. They took a particular, shall we call it a character, and turned them into a one-trick pony in the show. And this actually really bothers me, which is what they did to Skull.
This really bothers me too. This is actually my least favorite thing about the show, which is that Skull goes from being like a snarky, funny teen. He's just like all weird and dark, and he talks super slow. And I mean, I think part of that is due to the fact that in the Whispering Skull, like, he doesn't have that like real relationship yet with Lucy that we see in later books, but it really feels like his character was, you know, flattened a bit.
Yeah.
It was so flattened.
A lot.
They decided to just go with scary, didn't they? In the show, like, he's all mysterious, death is coming, and then she falls on the ground, like, face like, oh, like a Victorian lady.
They kept some Victoriana.
Instead of Lucy, can you hear me?
Right.
Yeah, in the books, it's like, death is coming. I really find it interesting that he starts off with trying to give her some, like, ancient death wisdom kind of thing. What is it? Life is in death and death is in life.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is what he tells her in the books. Which is funny because Marissa Fitz asked him for wisdom and he insulted her, and then he didn't get to talk to anyone for 50 years. So that's probably why. Anyway, so he tries to give Lucy some ancient wisdom, and Lucy goes, yeah, no, I've got squash donuts to give the boys. Bye.
Right. Like, Lucy's like, I got more important things to do than this, like, philosophical stuff.
And then he's so offended he doesn't talk to her for 6 months.
But Book Skull is so funny, and we don't get any of that from Show Skull, and I really missed it.
I did like the bit where he said, send the boys in because you're valuable. You could talk to me. And the boys aren't.
Yeah, that's true. There was I think, like, based on comments again the screenwriters have made, like, the tone switching is really hard in TV because you have to remember, like, when you're switching tone, it's not just one actor or just one line of a script. It's like a whole production. It's all the lighting and all the music and and with the Skull you have all these special effects to take into account as well, which are expensive. So I guess it was just a really complicated character, and yeah, it was always going to be very, very tricky to pull off.
Honestly, the Skull, I always thought they should have just made him animated. Like, have everything else exactly how it was, but the Skull make him animated.
Like the old Narnia movies.
Yeah, and then when he does something creepy, you could turn it CGI or something.
Or like little chibi version when he's just being annoying.
Oh
Yeah.
my god.
Just a little chibi skull floating over Lucy's shoulder.
Oh.
It'd be adorable.
The Skull would hate that so much.
Tangent time. Lockwood and Co would make an amazing animation. It would be such a good
would.
cartoon, Scooby-Doo
I
style.
have also thought that. Oh, you want Scooby-Doo? I was thinking anime. I think it would be a perfect anime.
Now, have you seen... Okay, sorry. Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated? They did like a version of Scooby-Doo when they were like, what if we gave it an actual plot, an actual character development? And you know what? I unironically love it. But then again, I unironically love all versions of Scooby-Doo that don't include Scrappy-Doo. So that's just a character defect that I have.
Anyway, let's talk about a character change that they did that I didn't really like. And that is that Lockwood is kind of dumb in the show. I'm sorry, the script here says Lockwood isn't smart enough. He is dumb. He is like...
He's a dumb pretty
I
boy.
had to stop watching the show at the auction scene because I was just watching him make stupid decision after stupid decision after stupid decision, and I wanted to break the TV, reach my hands through, and throttle him like the girl from The Ring. Okay?
That is my least favorite scene.
It's just... He is... And not just in the he is incredibly unhinged and out of his mind way in the show, which again I think must be a timeline thing, because I think like Jessica died like 3 weeks ago for him to be acting like that. But anyway.
What's that? Oh, we lost Nat. Oh no.
Anyway. just in general, because like they did kind of like, they took, like you said, they took a lot of the nuances out. Like George in the books, he's the smart one, but he's also a bit of an action hero. Like we talked about it in the George thing. He has that whole glow up where he becomes like he becomes, what do you call it? He becomes built, basically. He gets very strong and all of this. He's always on the front lines with his sword and whatnot, whereas in the show, you could kind of see why he's left out of a lot of bits. Like even in the boat, he's like, oh, obviously I'm the one who's going to stay, because he's just not on the front lines. His action hero bit is taken away. He's solely the smart guy. Lockwood, the action hero, is solely the action hero in the show, whereas he's actually very smart in the books.
He's so smart and so strategic, and he knows so much.
He knows so much. That's the thing. The thing with the dagger in Jack Carver's back. In the show, of course, George identifies it. In the books, it's Lockwood. He looks at it and he goes, oh, it's a Mughal dagger. It's probably from India. He says it's from the 16th century. Then he talks about how the hilt's inlaid and blah, blah, blah. He goes all about this because his parents studied that kind of stuff. So he knows about it.
Mm-hmm. And that's a wonderful character aspect for him, that he got really into this stuff that his parents were into, and he's read the books in his house and their papers and all of that. Yeah, I'm sad to lose that as well.
Yeah, to me, Book Lockwood is a history nerd very much in his own way, even if he's not a nerd in the same way that George is. And we don't see that in the show at all.
I do think it's worth noting that, like, as far as the characterization is concerned, like, the show arcs are not completed. I think we've said this before, maybe. But, like, it's possible that the final product, Lockwood, would have been closer to the books, that we might have seen his strategic thinking develop and, like, his detective instincts develop. And likewise, like, you know, George does have a moment in the catacombs where he, like, you know, he fights off the ghost that's attacking Kipps. So maybe he would have gotten more into that as well. It's just, we are trying to make judgments here on, like 40% of the show versus like 100% of the books. So yeah
I like to hope, or at least to think, that that is true. I mean, he has a lot of potential still in the show and could still grow into the leader that we see him grow into in the books as well. Especially through his relationship with Lucy, who's like being a calming influence on him, the whole like just reckless enough. You could really see that then come through in future seasons if we'd had them.
I do have trouble seeing Show Lockwood do the whole blue whale bit, though.
Oh, I mean, I can see it. I think Cameron could pull it off. I trust him.
It's a crucial aspect of characterization. They should have done that in like all the auditions. No, we don't want you to read that lovely speech. No, you got to strain orange juice through your teeth. Okay, no, you've got a gap in your teeth. This is not going to work.
Not the bottom of the Thames used to be a friendlier place to be. No. Orange juice through the teeth.
No, not giving that dramatic speech about, you know, how they've come here to help everyone when he's standing on the steps of the catacombs. Oh
Although, actually, speaking of orange juice, last call out to, like, book fidelity, there is that moment when they're having breakfast together, I think in the Whispering Skull arc, and Lockwood goes to the fridge, he takes out his orange juice, and he shakes it. So it must be the kind with bits in, because he's getting it evenly distributed. They think of everything.
If they did that deliberately, then I'm going to buy them all chocolate, because that's fantastic. That's so much attention to detail.
Screenwriters, if you're listening, claim your chocolate here. And it's the good kind. We'll send you the good stuff from Ireland, not the American stuff.
Yeah, you guys have much better chocolate.
All right, so I think we've talked long enough for today about orange juice and chocolate. I think we are definitely going to have a whole nother episode on where they were going to take season 2, what they could have done with future seasons, or could do still. You never know. Hope springs eternal. And boy, do I have thoughts, because I have given this particular topic way too much thought. It's been a while, but I think they're still rattling around in my brain somewhere.
Yeah, well, I know I would have been pretty much traumatized by watching the Hollow Boy on screen, so...
Oh, yeah, all of us would have been, for sure.
I would have just been on the floor.
Oh, I would have loved to see that.
would have been amazing.
Oh, man.
Just all of the ghosts at the end of the aisles and them slowly moving aside as you walk closer. That whole thing.
Yes.
So creepy.
The creepy fetch.
Yeah. It would have been so expensive to film. like so expensive.
Yeah, that's probably why we don't have it.
See, they should have just animated the ghosts. This is the thing. They should have just animated the ghosts. Would have been cheaper.
Animated Lockwood and Co. That's our new hill to die on.
Get the original actors back to voice them.
Yeah.
Lucy, Lucy Lou, where are you? We've got some ghosts behind
Oh,
you.
that's good.
That was excellent. Great job.
Hey!
All right, wrapping up then. Final thoughts on the show adaptation. Assuming we only ever do get the one season, was it a successful adaptation?
If we're judging success by how much the adapters loved the source, and we always measure everything by love around here, I think you could definitely say that Complete Fiction and Joe Cornish not only know the books, but they really love them. And maybe they don't love the same parts as I did. Like, you know, I feel like they emphasize Lockwood's vulnerability over his intelligence, maybe, but they still really love it. And I also think that it's worth stepping back and comparing this show to other adaptations like Artemis Fowl, for example. I don't know if anyone's... Well, I know that we have at least one Artemis Fowl fan listening, and I really liked those books as well. I never tried to watch the trailer because it's like... Or I never tried to watch the adaptation. I watched the trailer and it was just horrendous. Like, Disney changed the most fundamental aspect of the main character. Like, he's a criminal child prodigy. Like, he's quite a dark character. And they changed him to, like, this kind of fun-loving, adventurous surfer kid who'd do anything to save his dad. And it's just like...
What?
Oh, like... It was a universally hated adaptation. Like, it was a real kick in the teeth for the fans. Like, it was just like, we don't care. We're here to make money off you. So, you know, when you compare that...
And I think we can all...
Yeah.
We can all think of adaptations that were bad. Right?
That were
so
not...
many bad adaptations.
Either because they were actually too true to the source or they took it in way the wrong direction. There's a lot of bad ways to adapt a book.
So, I mean, I think there were so many constraints around making TV shows, like casting, script writing, finding locations, production, effects. The miracle is that we got as much of we did as something so good. And it's important to celebrate, like, how good it was. And that it was a really unique achievement. Even if it's not always perfect, it's some of the most engaging TV.
I would say if impact is a measure of success, like you said, we measure things in love. I think an awful lot of love has come out of this adaptation. Think about it. Like, I'm in London, May's in Ireland, Lizzie's on the west coast of America, Meg's on the east coast of America. We're all here. We know each other. We're friends now because of this TV show. And this TV show started because, you know, Jonathan Stroud at one point had this image of a boy and a girl on a doorstep ready to fight ghosts and decided to write it down. And it kind of just makes me feel like the smallest things just turn into these big things. So because of this show, we've all come together. We've all read these books. We've like linked up with other people who all read these books. You know, Lock Nation, people keep calling us, well, at least whenever I go to an event, people say, oh, you're part of Lock Nation to me now. And I've never really thought that I deserved the moniker, because, you know, the people who do kind of run Lock Nation, if you can run Lock Nation, they're setting up all these fandom events and they're putting all the effort into it. They're putting like so many hours of hard work into this. These are lovely people. And people are coming all the way from Australia. You know, people are coming from America to these events and they're all meeting up. And it's not just because they love the books, because they love the show. It's also because they now love each other that we're all coming. And this all happened because somebody made an adaptation of these books. So was it successful? I think it's put a lot of good in the world that wasn't there to start off with. So you can't say it was
It's
bad.
all right, Kiki. You can say you love us.
Oh, I
you can
adore
say
you.
it. It's okay.
And this is my American half coming out now. I absolutely love you guys. I adore you guys. I have met so many other people through this fandom who I love and adore as well. And one of my favorite things about going to the fan meetups is seeing how excited everybody is to see each other as well. And I love like how like Jonathan, and he brings his lovely wife Gina, and they all come, and Georgia comes, and I love how they come and they're so excited to see everybody, and everybody's so excited to see them. And there's a lot of love in the world and in the room. And yeah, I'm really glad. I have smiled so much since watching this show, and it is, you know, directly it links back to the fact that I decided to watch the show, and then I went online and I wanted to find out more about it, and that has made me much happier in lots of different ways.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, and on a personal note, not just the friends we made along the way, obviously, but we also made a podcast.
Yeah.
I had never really written a thing before I got into this fandom, and any fanfic readers know that that's no longer true.
Lizzie has written many, many things since she joined this fandom.
I know other people were in the same boat. I think, Meg, you hadn't written much, right, before this?
Me?
Either?
I'd done creative writing, but it had been a really long time, and I frankly wasn't sure if I'd ever pick it back up again. And now here I am, working, obviously still writing fic, but also working on some original work too. So it's been all because of the show.
Yeah, and I've discovered a love of writing that I kind of always wanted to have, but never felt like I could do that thing. And this has given me the opportunity to explore that and to find a new love. So yeah, if we measure with our hearts, this was a huge success.
Okay, and now we have to go before we all start crying.
Yes, we have to go before we all start sobbing. If you have any other questions that you'd like us to answer in a future episode or anything you'd love to hear us talk about, preferably does not involve us all crying on recording, you can reach out to us. You can find us on our website. We're at hauntingthenarrative.wixsite.com/podcast. We're also on Tumblr, Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram. All the places are linked in the show notes.
All right. Well, thank you all for being here. Thank you to everyone for listening. And thank you eternally to Jonathan Stroud, Joe Cornish, and everyone who has put so much love into the show and into this fandom. You have truly changed our lives. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
From all of us at Haunting the Narrative, until next time.